we think these elite athletes never experience self-doubt. We might see them on TV and, we just watched the Super Bowl and, you might think that Patrick Mahomes or Brock Purdy never experienced the self-doubt, which is actually untrue. And working with some of the best athletes, I realized when they really open up is that they are just like you and I.
Welcome back to the Dream Architect Life podcast. Brittany Anderson here today with a woman that you may recognize if you have been paying attention to some of the people that we've brought to town, to our community, and to our clients. So I'm going to formally introduce you to someone who came and spoke to our wonderful community, Cindra Kamphoff. Cindra is an award-winning keynote speaker and certified professional coach for leaders, professional athletes, and championship teams. Her clients range from Verizon Wireless, Target, and Bobcat to the Minnesota Vikings. She has provided mental training for the Minnesota Vikings for 4 years, working one-on-one with the players. Cindra has also worked with the United States Olympic track and field team while they were in Tokyo. She's also the founder of the Mentally Strong Institute, which provides one-on-one coaching services to purpose-driven leaders just like you to help them multiply their confidence, increase their influence, and get to their goals quicker. Cindra is also an author of an Amazon bestseller, Beyond Grit, 10 Powerful Practices to Gain the High Performance Edge, and a follow-up book, Beyond Grit for Business, 10 Powerful Practices to Boost Performance, Leadership, and Your Bottom Line. Her podcast, The High Performance Mindset, is ranked, get this, in the top 0.5% of all podcasts. Cindra resides in Minnesota with her husband, who is a school principal, and their 2 teenage boys. Cindra, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much, Brittany. I'm really excited to be here, and just thank you so much for an awesome introduction. And I'm just really looking forward to talking to you today.
Well, let me tell you, every time, and obviously we've had a chance to get to know each other a bit over the last several months, but every time that I talk to you, that I'm looking at all of your accomplishments, I am so darn impressed and just excited for you and all the things that you've done. So obviously we have seen or heard the formal bio, but talk a little bit about really what got you to this point. How did you get into the space of mindset coaching and all the wonderful things and contributions that you've done?
Yeah, well, great question to get started. And just, again, thank you so much for having me. It's just an honor to be here and talking to you. It's really going to be lots of fun. My story starts when I was in high school. I grew up in Iowa, and my senior year, I ran the fastest mile in the state of Iowa. And so, I had these really big goals of making it to the Olympics and getting to college and running there. And I did get a college scholarship, but it was there in college where I really struggled with my own mindset and just constantly comparing myself to other people, could lead my team in the workouts, but then into the meets, I would just crumble under the pressure. And that's where I got really interested in this field of performance psychology to figure my own self out. Um, I didn't, I didn't know how to apply the theory to practice at the time. And so just generally felt like I did not reach my potential in college, but I really feel like it happened for me. And kind of what I mean by that, Brittany, is I think there was a gift there in college. I think my struggles is now what makes me really passionate about what I do. And I try to make things really practical and easy to understand and put them into sticky tools so that people can actually use them. And it's not just kind of theory, trying to put theory into practice. And that's what I feel like part of my life's mission is.
I think that's truly a gift, Cindra, because there's so many things and, human nature, we may or may not make things fairly complicated at times. And I think having that practical system and having somebody to be able to break it down and actually show you in a methodical way that, there is a process and there is a system, and this is not as hard as we're making it out to be. So I think that that's such a gift. And I want to bounce because I think part of your not only do you have a gift for what you teach, but a gift for your writing. And I want to talk a bit about your book, Beyond Grit. You talk about how there are 10 practices of high performance. Can you go through those 10 practices? Because I think it's relevant to what you just talked about with the formula, the structure, and all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So these are the 10 practices of what I call high performance. Sometimes I call it the world's best. Because if you look at the research in performance psychology, these are the 10 practices that lead to people consistently thriving. And so they're research-based, science, backed by science. And I'll tell you what the 10 are. And if people want to download a free PDF, they can go to beyondgrit.com/bonus. So Beyond Grit's the title of the book, beyondgrit.com/bonus. And then the PDF is there. But number one is grit. And the book is called Beyond Grit because, grit is about staying passionate about what you do and purposeful about your goals. But there's these other 9 practices support our grit. Number 10 or number two, not 10. Number 2 is purpose. So, why you do what you do and getting clear on that. And also your purpose drives your goals and your grit. Number 3 is about mastering your thinking. And this one is all about how do you deal with the negativity or the self-doubt? And how do you really continue to build your own belief in self? Number 4 is about mastering your own self-awareness, or I call it know yourself to master yourself. And this one is about continuing to grow in your understanding of who you are, your strengths, your areas of growth, your triggers. Number 5 is dominate the controllables. And this is all about focusing on what you can control versus what you can't. Really big, important tool that I find every day people get stuck on things they can't control. Number 6 is about owning the moment. So can you spend more time in the present than in the future or the past? 7 is empowering emotions. So this is all about choosing to feel good even when things are hard. Number 8 is about authenticity and owning who you are. We can't be somebody else. You're the best you that you can be. 9 is about living and letting go. And this is the most difficult one for people to practice. And we can talk about that. So how do you move on quickly from disappointments or setbacks? And 10 is about choosing courage over comfort. And that's something I think we need to do every day, is choose to be courageous over just what's comfortable to help us live our purpose. So these are the 10 practices, the 10 things that allow you to continue to thrive. But the important thing is they're practices. They're not things we're born with, but we actually have to practice them every day.
Yeah. I think that as you're going through those 10, I'm like playing it in my head of how can I apply each of those, and where do they become relevant in this whole notion of mastering your mindset and moving through with grit and all of those great things. So you made mention of one of them that is the most difficult. And I think you said it's live and let go. So can you talk about, I guess, why is that the most difficult? And then what can people potentially do to overcome that and actually embrace that principle?
Yes, a great question, Brittany. And, I speak to, probably about 100 audiences a year. So I do a lot of keynote speaking. And when I ask people, which one is, I always ask people, circle the one that you're the best at, and put a smiley face by the one that you could keep growing in today, right? With this idea that you can always keep on growing. And this is the one I find people struggle with the most. And so live and let go, what does this mean? That we can quickly move on from mistakes or disappointments or difficulties. And we can see the gift even in a setback. And this is difficult because as humans, we make meaning based on the past, right? So you even showing up in this podcast interview, you're doing it in a way that, you've been thinking about in the past and you've done it in the past. Maybe some of it is habitual, right? But we make meaning based on things that have happened in the past. And so, of course, it's difficult for us to let go because of fear or anxiety, and people don't really love to let go. They like to feel in control. And so the tool that I find is a game changer in this practice is something I call learn, burn, return. And I'd like to share a quick story, if that makes sense, to kind of demonstrate learn, burn, return that I think people will really like.
I love it. Let's do it.
Okay. So Brittany mentioned that I have done some work over several years with the Minnesota Vikings. And one of the players that wrote the foreword of my book is a guy named Adam Thielen. He grew up in Minnesota, played for the Vikings, and now is playing for the Carolina Panthers. And about a year and a half ago, where the Vikings were playing the Saints in a playoff game, Adam fumbled the ball really early on in the game. And he went over and made this little action gesture kind of just like if you're listening to it, the action was just like you're pressing the handle down, right? And next play, he was right back in really fast, like that fast. And an ESPN reporter saw him make this action. And, what I would describe is Adam has taught himself to have a next play mentality, like we all need. Think about if you're going through a big transition or a big change, you need to be thinking of, okay, what's next? How can I move forward quickly instead of just staying where you are right now? And so next play, right? Moving on quickly. And so this mentality helped him catch this 43-yard catch over his head later on in the game. It was absolutely gorgeous, sets the Vikings up to win the game. And afterwards, this ESPN reporter went up to Adam and said, it can be so much pressure in a playoff game. You got this like weight on your shoulders. Adam, what did you do to move on quickly? And think about this. If you're an NFL player, you make a big mistake in a playoff game. If your team doesn't win, ESPN's going to be, probably blaming you for the mistake. There's 6 camera angles, that fumble is going to be replayed over and over again. There's probably going to be a picture in the Star Tribune. Okay, you get it, right? So much pressure than you and I likely feel throughout our day. And so she said, what were you doing to move on so quickly? And his response was, well, I was pretending to flush a toilet. And then the next day in ESPN, there's this headline that came out that said, mental coach taught Vikings Adam Thielen how to flush his mistakes. So like, that's how I get headlined in ESPN, but the actual tool I was teaching him is learn, burn, return. And the principle I was teaching him is that what we want to do is have a long-term memory of our successes and a short-term memory of our mistakes or failures. But your brain does the opposite. It's going to linger on those things that haven't gone well. So I have some actions. If people are watching this, the actions are learn, put your fingers on your temple, and then burn with a snap and return with a power pose. And the idea is that when you're stuck in the cycle of overthinking, which I find a lot of high achievers, high performers, people, entrepreneurs overthink a lot. Just ask yourself, what did I learn? And you want to take it more objectively. Like, don't take the mistake or disappointment to heart. Protect your confidence. Just ask yourself, what am I learning objectively? And then if you have a burn phrase or action, burn means let it go, a phrase or an action that you use every time, like flush it, let it go. Or I was thinking Taylor Swift, she's in the news all the time right now. So maybe it's like shake it off, or what I use the snap. Maybe that's what's helpful for you. But if you use the same burn phrase or action every time you're struggling or your mind is overthinking, what this allows you to do is strengthen a new neural pathway. And then you can move on more quickly next time. And then return means the power pose, hands on your hips, building yourself back up, building your confidence back up, checking your body language, right? Telling yourself you're here for a reason, you got this. And what I would say, Brittany, I'm a recovering overthinker because I used to overthink everything. And then it's just passively and endlessly. And I just realized I'm just wasting so much energy. So I use learn, burn, return every single day because there's always something that is a disappointment for me or something I wish I would have done differently, because we're imperfect, right? We're not perfect.
Hey, Brittany here. In case you hadn't heard, our latest book, Dream Architecture, is available for the taking. Think about it like this. What is your biggest, wildest dream of what retirement could look like? Not the dream that your friends have, or your parents maybe had, or your coworkers. Your best dream, the unreasonable one, the one that you might have trouble admitting even to yourself. So that is what the Dream Architecture book is about. Hop on over to dreamarchitecturebook.com so you can start dreaming big today. Just to give some context here too. So for our listeners, we had Cindra come in and run a team meeting for us at Sweet Financial. And it was, first of all, it was so much fun. And our team was so highly engaged, which was so cool to see. It can be tricky when you have a team of different personalities and different just ways of being to have everybody engaged towards one thing. But one thing that really landed is this whole notion of burn it, right? So when you are in this state of frustration or you are overthinking, like you're talking about here, Cindra, we have this little thing now where it's like a snap and burn it. Yeah, like I'm done. I'm over it. We're moving on. We're moving
I
forward. We're
love
coming
it.
back even stronger. And so I know that
Yeah.
just from my own experience with a few of our team members, that's been something that has been so helpful just in conversations and in supporting each other and in helping us show up as our best. So it's just a real life example of how that can be implemented. And it can be done too. I think about it with my kids, and Cindra, you and I have talked about this before too, where if you can help your kids, your grandkids, you're listening to this, have this notion of learn, burn, return, and they're coming back stronger every time. I think that is such a beautiful thing to teach a young person so that maybe we can help them avoid that overthinking, before they get to
Yes.
be the squirrely high achieving adult. I mean, me, the type
Yeah.
A brain, where you do overthink
Sure.
things and you do find yourself spiraling sometimes. So those principles are just so simple, but so impactful when you implement them.
Yeah, and why did I have a tool like this and design a tool like this? Because of my own experience, right? I go back to college, and when you asked me why I do what I do, it's if I would have learned to move on more quickly, I could have protected my own motivation and my own confidence. And that's why we need to teach ourselves to move on quickly. And especially if you're a high achiever, high performer, you might think that the more you repeat, the more that you beat yourself up, the better you're going to do. But the essence of this practice is it kind of sits on the research of self-compassion, which means a couple of things. The concept of self-compassion was coined by a woman named Kristen Neff, which I love her work. And she talks about, three things. Everyone suffers. It's part of the human experience. And, can we be kind to ourselves, more kind in our mind, right? With our self-talk. And then the last one is just taking more of a mindful approach to when things don't go perfect, right? Just kind of noticing and not working to beat yourself up. And we know that there's so many benefits of self-compassion. In fact, you're going to get to your goals quicker if you're kinder to yourself along the way. So just essential for ourselves, especially when we're in transition or we're looking for the next chapter. We can really be struggling with that because it's like, gosh, we're having to let go of something that we maybe built or that we've been used to. And that's so difficult.
Mm. You made mention of tools before, and there's one in particular, and I feel like I have a little bit of a competitive advantage here on this, but so I know Ty on our team, he has been, working with your team, and it's been such a cool experience. And one of the things that he shared was something about a truth meter. And so I would love
Cool.
for you to talk about this concept, Cindra, because, and just for our listeners' sake, as Cindra explains it, it's her. She's going to explain it way better than I can. But I think this is something that every human being should implement into their lives because it is, again, simple but impactful. So I would love for you to just share a little bit about that.
Absolutely. And thanks for asking about that. I do think we need simple tools like learn, burn, return that are sticky, that people can remember. We need the truth meter because we all can get stuck in that negativity bias, right? And what I
Yeah.
mean by that is humans, we're more likely to think about what's wrong and then what's right, hasn't gone well, what we wish would have gone different. And so our negativity bias means that negative events, they linger longer and they stick with us longer. They make a bigger imprint in our brain than the positives. So we need tools to get unstuck. And I love the concept by Daniel Amen about automatic negative thoughts. That many of our thoughts are just automatic. And so when you're stuck in a thought pattern, or when you're believing something, that is not serving you, what you do is the truth meter is just ask yourself three questions. Number one, is this true? Is this even true? And most of our stories in our own mind are not even true. They're just things, again, that our brain is using to protect us, typically future-based thinking. So number one, is this even true? Number two, so there's three questions in the truth meter. Number two is this thought serving me? Is this really helping me be the best version of myself? And when I ask those two questions to people, most people say number one, the thought's not true. Sometimes it is, but usually it's not. Number two is usually people say, well, no, it's not serving me, and helps you take a step back and really examine, do I even really want to believe this right now? And then number three is it's likely that you can always choose a new empowering thought. And just even saying that, like I can choose a new empowering thought that is true and that's serving me, and I can do that right now. And even myself who teaches this and tries to practice this every day, I can get stuck. I have two teenage boys, and I know Brittany, yours aren't teenagers yet, but sometimes they get in this little cycle. And my thought is when something happens with my kids, my brain automatically goes to like, I'm a terrible mom. And I don't know I know other people's brain goes to that too, would go to these extremes, right? Generalizations. And I'm like, is that true? Absolutely not. I'm a loving and supportive mom. Number two, is this serving me? No way. Because when I believe I'm a terrible mom, I just disengage. That's what I know about myself. And number three is, what's a more empowering thought that I can choose right now? And that more empowering thought would be like, I'm doing the best that I can. I'm a loving and supportive mom. I'm going to listen to my kids and see what they need, and just it helps you stop these like limiting beliefs and from those cycling.
Mm-hmm. Cindra, the first thing that comes to mind here is, and again, you and I have had conversations around this about how even though we teach it and this is what you eat, sleep, and breathe, there's still reminders that you need for yourself. And, I think one great thing too, and again, I'm thinking about our listeners here who have kids, who have grandkids, what I have taken away from Cindra and her teaching is exactly what you just gave the example of. And I think, parenthood, motherhood is such a pure example of being able to quickly kind of, Dan Sullivan, the creator of Strategic Coach, calls it going into the gap, like thinking about how far you have to go and how much you still have to do and what you haven't done versus how far you have come. And, I even think
So
about
true.
it, right. And it's so easy to get into that trap. And, I think about it with my own children too. And even helping them, like one of my kids will come home and be like, oh, the worst day ever. I'm like, worst day ever. There's got to be something good we can talk about. And we'll talk through it. And pretty soon it's like, okay, well, lunch was really fun because I got to sit by my best friend. Oh, really? Tell me more about that. And by the end of it, they're like, actually, I had a really great day today. So it's those little things that, again, I am so imperfect and I catch myself going down the rabbit hole. But when I find myself helping other people to practice the methods that you teach, Cindra, it's like it lifts me up and it brings me out of that space too. So I think it's just simple little things that you can do, not only for yourself, but for your loved ones and the people in your life that are just so darn powerful.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you saying that. And like what this all comes down to is awareness
Yeah.
of our thinking and just noticing what our thoughts even are. And what something like the truth meter does is it helps you get unstuck from that thought. So you don't go in a downward spiral and then generalize and say, I had a terrible day, when maybe it's just this one little thing.
Yeah. It's that simple adage of every day may not be good, but there's something good in every day. Again, it's something that we know and we might be able to recite it like I just did, but without having the practice and the principles that you're teaching here, it's easier said than done. So I want to pivot a little bit here, Cindra, because I would guess that anybody tuning in as they're listening to your bio and hearing, whoa, Minnesota Vikings, Target, Bobcat, the Olympics, like what? Like these are amazing, amazing moments in time, and organizations and practices and all these great things. So I would love for you to talk a little bit about, you supported the USA track and field team in Tokyo. So can you share what was your biggest lesson, your biggest takeaway from that experience?
Oh, such a great question. We can talk about two different things here, if this makes sense to you, but I think we should talk about pressure and how the best deal with pressure. And
Yes.
then the second thing, and maybe I'll start with the second thing, is we think these elite athletes never experience self-doubt. We might see them on TV and, we just watched the Super Bowl and, you might think that Patrick Mahomes or Brock Purdy never experiences self-doubt, which is actually untrue. And working with some of the best athletes, I realized when they really open up is that they are just like you and I. And I think the power of belief in self, and even along the way, these Olympians can doubt themselves. There was this video that went viral that was absolutely beautiful of an elite athlete named Quenisha Burks, and she just every day talked to herself that she was going to be an Olympian. and she made it, right? And she wasn't even expected to get in the top 3 at the trials to get to the Olympics. And it went viral because people realized the power of belief in self. So I think number one, asking yourself, what is it, a goal that you really want? And, what are you working for this year? And what do you need to believe about yourself to get to that goal? That's really important that we surround and mold our beliefs based on to help us support our goals. And the second thing is, to be able to perform at a moment that really matters to you. And Olympic athletes have 4 years to train for a moment, right? So 4 years, every single day, they are working 4 years, for this one moment. And so it can feel like so much pressure in the moment where, again, there's video cameras, there's, it's nationally televised. And one of the things I talk to all the elite athletes I work with is this idea of pressure. And pressure comes when we're typically focused on the outcome, right? The outcome is important to us and the outcome matters, and we feel like we're judged by the outcome, but we don't have control over the outcome. And so, thinking about for people who are listening, you experience pressure every day in some way. Maybe it's a pressure to build your business or a pressure to make the transition or change or, pressure to be the best parent you can be or grandparent, right? We all experience pressure, but it is self-created, and it typically we experience it when we're focused on the future or the outcome. And so I have this little tool. Again, here we go, tools.
I love them.
It's the way my brain works now, right? How can I write a tool, make a tool of this? And I call it pop the pressure. And so the moments where you feel pressure, just do 3 quick things. The first P stands for take a power breath, maybe a couple power breaths. And if you breathe while you're counting, so just like 4 counts in, hold for 4 counts, out for 4, just helps you reset because you can't think about 2 things at once, the counting and the breath, right? Or the thing that's frustrating you or making you feel anxious or nervous. So P stands for power breath. O is the opportunity. And I think remind yourself, this is an opportunity to remind yourself that you have everything you have inside you that you need. Elite athletes and the best performers use natural tools within themselves to deal with pressure. So opportunity to remind yourself you have everything you need right now. And then the other P stands for the process. And that's the opposite of the outcome. It's so much we're focusing on scoring the touchdown or how much money we want to make this year. But that sometimes creates so much more pressure and anxiety. So instead, focus on, 2 or 3 or 4 of the small things you can do right now. At the Olympics, it might be, what can you do right now in this rep? Where does your mind need to be? Where does your focus need to be? What keyword could you tell yourself in this rep, right? Those are the examples of the process. And that helps us feel more confident and less anxious and feeling less pressure. So pop the pressure.
I love that. I think the conversation of pressure, because excuse me, even if you're not an elite athlete listening to this, there are so many moments in time that this can be applied. I think about even some of the toughest, when we talk about transitions, retirement can feel like a world of pressure, like you're in a pressure tank, because there's this shift in identity when you know exactly where you've come from, but now you have to decide who you are post that life and what you enjoy and what you want to do and how you want to spend your time. And that can feel suffocating for some. I also think about one of the hardest transitions that nobody likes to talk about, but that is also like widowhood. Things that happen so unexpectedly that all of a sudden you feel like somebody's standing on your chest. And, I just think that some of these principles can be applied during times that feel almost impossible. And that's why I love the work that you do, Cindra, because I think that there's so many ways that we can apply these to our daily lives to really help us master our mindset and, keep that right frame of mind and keep that forward momentum that can feel a little impossible sometimes. So I do want to ask this question. There are, we'll just say there are naysayers out there. There may be people in our audience members' lives, in our own lives, that will look at you. You have some big ambition, some big goal, and they're like, yeah, right. That's impossible. That's ridiculous. That's silly. You're never going to do that. Why would you even try? Like all of the naysaying that can come with somebody's speaking their big ambitions or their big dreams or goals into the world. So what's
Yes.
something that somebody could implement to help them maybe block that out or not let that affect their own path or their own trajectory?
What a great question. I would say, the most important thing is what you believe about yourself versus what other people believe about you. And you're always going to be told that you can't do it. When I think about when I was actually at the Boston Marathon bombing in 2013 and came back and just completely changed my own trajectory of my life because that moment was I felt like it was a wake up call for me. Like, was I really living my purpose? And I decided hey, I wanted to work for the Vikings. And when I would tell people that, they'd be like, yeah, good luck. Like you didn't play football. And so what I have found now working with some of the elites is they have what I call a watch me mentality. And the best who stay in the league the longest, when they're, let's say, a commentator on ESPN or the TV, or there's something that's written about them that's really negative, they have this mentality where they can flip it and they can say, well, watch me, I'll show you,
Mm,
right? And so, think about to what degree would that be helpful for you? I think sometimes it can be all consuming and then it becomes more of like this negative or disempowering energy. But I think it also can be really empowering to say, okay, Brittany, you don't think I can work for the Vikings? Watch me, and then it fuels you instead of believing that you can't do it. And, sometimes people say things to you like that because they want to protect you.
yeah.
But I do know we all need big goals to move forward towards, and we need something to stretch us. And when you think about what's going to help you thrive the most, even in retirement, we need goals to keep us going, right? And there's quite a bit of research that if we don't, right, we're not going to live as long. So you need something to keep you going. And I think those goals should be slightly out of your comfort zone. And guess what? You might not reach those goals. Every year, I have a goal for my business. Um, I did reach it last year, but that's the only year I've ever reached it, because
Wow.
it's been so out of my comfort zone. And I think that's the way it should be. That should just be a little bit of stretch, and goals are meant to be able to be, changed and adjusted, and that's okay when you experience a setback.
I think that is such a beautiful answer. And I love that too. And I think there's some people that have that natural wiring of the watch me. It's like,
Yeah,
okay, well, game on, let's do this. Excuse me.
yeah. And Brittany, it's usually people who have experienced some kind of adversity already. And then that adversity allows them to move forward, right? And if you think about it, that's what adversity does. It's more about how we respond to it that matters, but it can fuel you when you experience a setback, right? Think about how you can make that your comeback.
Yeah, I love that. Making that your comeback. And like you said, have it not become all consuming, but be a positive, call it momentum in your life, something to help you just lean even further into what you want most. So, Cindra, before I ask you the last couple questions, if people want to follow you, get a hold of you, listen to your amazing podcast, how do they go about doing that?
Sure. I'd encourage people to head over to Dr. Cindra, so DrCindra.com, and you can find out about the podcast there. It's called The High Performance Mindset. You can also find that on Apple Podcasts. And Brittany, this is huge. We just found out we were in the top 1.5% of all podcasts, which kind of like
Woo-hoo!
blew my mind away. 600 episodes. We've been doing it for a long time, talk about grit. But people can head over to Dr. Cindra, and there's my books, Beyond Grit, Beyond Grit for Business over there. And if people want to find out more about our coaching, you can do that at Dr. Cindra, or my company is called Mentally Strong Institute, and we provide coaching for leaders and entrepreneurs and people who just want to be their best, people in transition, people who realize that they have another level to them and they want to increase their confidence and grow their influence and get to their goals quicker.
Mm. Well, I actually have, and I didn't even plan this, truth be told. I have your book sitting on my desk because I have been reading it. So for those that are actually
Oh,
watching on YouTube, it's awesome. And, Cindra, you again have so much to give to this world. And I highly encourage everybody that's tuning in to go grab a copy of the book, to subscribe to Cindra's podcast, and to really embrace what is being taught here, because they are things that, again, I love I love the analogy between like simple and easy. Like there's a lot of things in life that are very simple, but maybe not easy. And then there's other things that are easy, but not overly simple, right? So I think there's this delineation that needs to happen. And the one thing with what you do is you just simplify, these practices and how to master your mindset and how to form grit and how to move through some of the toughest things in life and just build up that resilience. So I so appreciate your work, Cindra, and what you put out into the world. And with that being said, I believe you're still working on a new book. Is there something
I
about
am.
confidence? I think that
I
if my memory
am.
serves me correct, can you talk about kind of your what's next?
Yeah, so great question. So I am writing a book on confidence, and people have been asking me like, why are you writing a book on confidence? And the reason I'm writing a book on confidence is every single person I've worked with one-on-one, we've talked about confidence, right? And if you think about some of the best athletes in the world, right, and they experience self-doubt just like you, I think that's really powerful to realize, hey, it's just part of the human experience. And so I find that confidence can be shaken really quickly. It's fragile. And what's interesting is it's a feeling and a foundational skill. And sometimes people get the feeling of confidence confused with like the skill of confidence. So the book's going to be talking about that and how can we sometimes not over-identify with the feeling of a lack of confidence. And so, for example, I was speaking a couple weeks ago, and right before I got on stage, I was like really nervous. And I'm like, I'm never really nervous, and there's lots of times where I speak a couple of times a week usually. And so it's like, I'm not nervous, what's happening? And, that feeling of confidence, I had to remind myself, hey, that feeling's going to come and go when I get on stage. And it's all about me serving other people. That's the skill of confidence that I've been developing, that you've been developing over years, right? So I'm just really looking forward to it. It's going to be really easy to read, tool-based book, just like we've been talking about, but also based on the science and the research in confidence. So can't wait for that to come out. That's going to come out at the end of this year. So you'll want to, there's a way to subscribe to my emails, and I do just a 1-minute video every 2 weeks. You can subscribe to those at drcindra.com, and that's how you can find out more when that's released. It's going to be cool. I'm going to read it and use it for myself.
I love it. And I cannot wait. I think that is something that is a topic that needs to be talked about even more. And I can't remember the first part of this quote, but it was talking about how confidence over time is actually earned. And if you think about it, you talking about, I speak a couple times a week and I, facilitate, different conversations and groups and teams and all of these great power hitters. But it's something that over time, it's putting in the reps, right? It's showing up, it's doing the work, it's being consistent, and it's staying true to your dreams. And that's part of what I think can help build confidence. So I'm excited for that book. Cindra, so the whole theme of this podcast, we talk about, it's called the Dream Architect Life. And we often talk about dreaming big and pursuing possibility and what that means. So I would love to know, flip it on the personal a little bit here. What is a big dream that you have for yourself and your future?
Awesome. What a great question. I love this quote by Eleanor Roosevelt. And no, it's not by Eleanor Roosevelt. It's by Ellen Shafar. I think but it says, if your dreams don't scare you, they aren't big enough. And I completely agree that my dreams should be scary, just like your dreams should be scary. I got a big dream to get this confidence book on a big bestseller list. So that's what I'm claiming. USA Today, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, something like that. And I think that the content can get it on the bestseller list. So that's what one of my big, huge dreams are. Another big dream I have is for our Mentally Strong Institute, just to continue to double this year, I think is what I would say, in terms of influence and the people that we continue to positively support, just to continue to bring the positive things in the world and the tools in the world to help people be their best, because we can just get in our own way so often. So those are two of the big dreams I'm claiming to you, Brittany. You can hold me accountable.
I will do that. And I will jump on that bad. Like my brain's already going, okay, who can I introduce Cindra to that can help her get on those big lists? I mean, you're going to do it. I can't wait. Cindra, so my final question for today is, what didn't I ask you that I should have?
That's such a great question. What didn't you ask me that I should have? What's interesting is this conversation about goals. And I think, there's a research study done a couple of years ago with two Harvard researchers that found a certain percentage of time we're not focused in the present. And what's your guess? What percentage of time do you think we're not focused in the present?
Oh my goodness. I bet it's so high. I bet it's like 80%.
Right. You think like 20% of the time we're in the present moment, right?
Yep.
Because our mind is like a monkey mind. It's going from like a tree to tree to tree, like a tree branch. And so what the researchers found is that 47% of the time we're distracted. 53% of the time we're in the present. And I actually think that's probably high, because some people, when I ask them, they say, well, I think it's 5% of the time. The research study found that the more time we are distracted and not in the present moment, we also increase our anxiety. So the study was called "A Distracted Mind is an Anxious Mind." And so for those people who maybe feel like they have a lot of anxiety right now, or just more than they'd like, I think working to get in the present moment is key to that. And usually that is future-based thinking when we're, again, feeling anxious of all the things that could happen. And so when we're talking about goals, I think notice when those goals really empower you, and that's when you should be focused on them. If they feel really overwhelming, get back to the process. Like, think about, for me, like that New York Times or Wall Street Journal, that feels really anxiety provoking to me. It's like, oh, it's such a big goal. And it's like, there's so much I have to do to try to get there, and my team has to do to get there. It's like, all right, well, what can I do right now? Right. And so just kind of noticing that is just being really mindful of when you spend time on those, focused on that, and when to spend time focused on the process, and just notice when you feel overwhelmed.
I am so glad that you landed there. And that was such a great way to wrap. And, I think, and we can talk, I mean, this could be a whole other conversation, but think about what's gone on in the last few years, and just certain levels of uncertainty and overwhelm. And it can be even worse when we find ourselves focusing on things that we have no control over, like the news media or the political space or the economy or whatever. It's like, we can't change that. And oftentimes when we are overthinking those things, we go back to your learn, burn, return. And, it's just these great principles that I think can ground us. And, your whole comment too about how, especially for a high achieving brain, we're constantly thinking about what's next. It's like, we can't help ourselves but live into the future. And that can be a really slippery slope. And I can say that from personal experience. I mean, there are times where I'm just like, that's it. I'm done. I'm quitting it all. I'm not going to do anything anymore because it's just too much.
It's
and then
overwhelming.
You come back, right? Then you come back to your center and you're like, okay, it's really, yes, it's big and it's ambitious, but I really just need to chunk it down and just focus on what's right in front of me, and maybe have a little bit of eye contact with my loved ones and really focus on that presence. And I think that it just helps keep us grounded. So, Cindra, thank you for all of your brilliance today and for your continued impact in the world. I personally can't wait to see what you continue to do.
Well, you're the best, Brittany. Thank you so much for having me. You're so delightful, and I love the way that you today just built me up, which makes the audience just even feel more comfortable and excited. And I just want to I just give some love to you, for doing this podcast, and also for you being a big dreamer and going after your big goals. So process over outcome.
Amen. I love it. Well, that wraps up today's episode of the Dream Architect Life podcast. If you liked what you heard today and you want to share a little bit of Cindra with the world, be sure to pass it on to your friends, share it with your loved ones. Also, be sure to like and subscribe so that you are the first one to find out when the new episodes drop. We'll catch you right back here next time.